Hey everyone, welcome back to the garage where we are going to continue repairs on my 1989 BMW 325i E30. Recently I've been sidetracked with a bunch of rust repair type videos. Now that the rust is taken care of, it's time to resume working on the mechanical aspects of this car. Now before the rust came up, I was concentrating on the rear end of the car. I was going in to replace the emergency brake cables. The reasoning behind that is because in order to do any of the other repairs at the back of the car, meaning the rear axles and the differential, I need to be able to lock the rear wheels so they don't move. In this video, we're not just going to replace the emergency brake cables, but we'll actually go in and replace the axles as well and do a little something special with the differential. Let's take a look at the parts. So the first thing we have here are the new emergency brake cables. If you remember back to the second video I made, one of the brake cables was cut and the other one was really slack. So I'm just going to go in and replace both of them. So next we have brand new brake hoses, and these are steel braided aftermarket alternatives. The ones on the car right now are the original rubber hoses and they're very cracked. So I thought we might as well, since we're going to be back here, throw some new lines in there and everything will be sorted on that end. The next thing here is a big one, and I just picked this up a few weeks ago. This is a limited slip differential. So the car I have is a 325i, which comes with an open differential. So what that means is if you think about you're on a wet road, you come to a stop on an uphill and then you give it a little bit too much gas when going to start again, one wheel's gonna spin because it's an open differential. It's gonna send all the power to the wheel that has the least amount of traction. Not exactly something desirable in a car you wanna have fun with. Now this differential is actually out of a 325iS, and it's a limited slip differential. So if you watch when I spin one of the outputs, the other output spins as well. There's also this S stamping at the top of the case, indicating that it is the limited slip differential. So this is quite a nice performance upgrade for this car, and I'm excited to get this in. It wasn't exactly a cheap purchase. I paid about $400, but this one is in very good condition, obviously out of a car with not too many miles on it, nor a car that was in the rust belt. So it was kind of a lot of money to spend on it, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. I'm gonna actually pull out the output shaft flanges and install new seals while it's out of the car. Might as well, I've got the parts. So the plan of attack today is to first replace the emergency brake cables, which are right here. And from there, we will lock the wheels up and then take the axles out. Once we have the axles out, we'll lower the differential. And then with all those things out, we'll replace the brake lines. And then assembly is the reverse of disassembly from that point forward. Let's hope we don't encounter too many rusted fasteners on this. We'll see. Let's get going on it. Okay, just installed both emergency brake cables, and let's take a look at this. So before there was absolutely no resistance in the emergency brake handle, but now that's what I'm talking about. Got them all adjusted at the drums and then tightened up the nuts here on the cable so that there's no more slack. As you can see, it only took about 5 clicks, and these drums are now locked and loaded. So that's good news, but of course that was probably the easiest job. Next on the agenda is to start removing the axles from the back. The boots are all ripped, so we gotta take those out. This can be kind of a pain, I've seen, so I'm just hoping that this is smooth sailing, but we'll see. Let's get going. just dropped the old differential out of the car. Let's take a look at this. As you can see, it is a big ball of grease and dirt, but I didn't pull it out of there because it was dirty. I pulled it out of there because it's an open differential. And then right beside it is the limited slip differential that I'll be putting right back in its place. So it's kind of neat to see a side by side. So next I'm gonna put new seals in the limited slip differential. Then once that's done, we'll be ready to put into the car. But before we put the differential into the car, we need to change out the brake lines now that we have all the access under the rear subframe. Let's go take a look at that. All right, getting under the car here, you can see that the subframe looks in pretty good shape, just a little bit of surface rust here and there. This is where the differential mounts. It mounts in these 4 locations, and then 1 location back here, that's where the bushing resides. And under here, while we've got everything out, we're gonna be replacing these brake hoses right here. So these are rubber, these are the original brake hoses, and they're no doubt past their prime, so we're gonna be installing some steel braided lines, since now we have access. Again, there's another one on this side. Kind of see it right there. Here's the emergency brake cable I just installed. One of those on each side. Emergency brake cable there. And so this is a rubber hose that leads into another hard line that goes onto the trailing arm. And then there's another soft line going to the caliper here. And this one's also very dry rotted and cracked. So we'll be replacing those, but we'll do that after everything else is reassembled. So a total of 4 brake lines going to be replaced, but only 2 right now with the differential out. Let's get going on it. The new intermediary brake lines installed, it's now time to plop the new differential back in the subframe. So it was a little bit of a struggle, but I got the differential finally fitted back in. Let's take a look at it. It looks a lot cleaner than the last one, I can tell you that much. See the new brake lines right next to it, and everything is bolted up. There's 5 bolts, and I figured out that you have to put in the uppermost bolts first, and then kind of wiggle around so you can get to the front 2 bolts to line up. So the next step is to install the new axles. Let's go check those out. Here are the old ones, and these things are pretty rough looking. You can see that those boots were completely gone and there's no grease really left inside of these things. Now these look like original BMW ones. I think you can tell by this sort of raised section in the middle. You know, these are probably rebuildable, I would assume, but I didn't really want to take the time to do that. Maybe I will do that later on. But I just went ahead and bought new axle half shafts, and they look really high quality. I got these off of Rock Auto, and a lot of people have asked, are they Chinese made? Well, I think they are, and I don't know why that would mean they're bad or anything like that, but you can see on the end there, it does say made in China. They're branded as Cardone Selects. I forget how much they were. I think for the set it was less than $200. That's not too bad. I mean, it comes with new bolts, 6 bolts that mount to the differential flanges, and they look good. I mean, I don't see anything that would make me think they're not of high quality. Again, I'm not going to really be doing anything extreme with this car. I'm not going to be trying to power slide it or drift it or anything like that. So, I mean, for just regular driving use, I can't imagine they won't be sufficient. So again, these don't have that raised section in the middle, which apparently points to original. So yes, they're not original, but I think they'll be good enough. Before slapping these in there, I'm going to put some anti-seize on the splines that go into the wheel hubs, so that if I ever need to take these back out, it'll be less of a pain. You'll notice it didn't actually take me that much work to get the old half shafts out, and that's because the previous owner actually replaced the rear wheel bearings. And it looks like when they put these back together, they applied a lot of anti-seize to these splines, which saved me a ton of work. So I'm really happy about that. That's about the only favor this owner has done me so far to date. So let's get these babies into the car. Installed, we reached the final step of this job, and that is to install the new brake lines that go from the intermediary lines to the actual brake calipers themselves. Let's take a look at them. Okay, so here are the new lines. They're steel braided, pretty short things, and they're really nice because there's no banjo bolts to deal with or any sort of copper crush washers. They're all flare type fittings, so they just tighten it up and it snugs around that flare right there. So that's really easy to install. Let's take a look at the old hoses in here. You can see these are pretty well dry cracked. I don't know if you can see that, but there's cracking all along through here. These are probably the original hoses if I were to guess. They look about every bit of almost 30 years old. So definitely time to replace those. While we're here, let's take a look at the axle I put in there, and the limited slip differential looks almost new back in there. Then the other hose is right back in there. And then our new emergency brake cable, which routes down to the wheel hub, is all fitted as well. So the whole rear end overall is looking pretty refreshed. The only thing left to do is just get these brake lines in there. So let's get down to it. Okay, so that's the brake lines fully replaced in the rear end. And with that, that means everything I was going to do in the back end of the car is now finished. Let's take a look at the parts we pulled out of this thing. So again, the first thing we did was remove the emergency brake cables. These things were well past their prime. One of them was in fact just straight up cut. Then we moved on to removing the axles. These things, the boots were completely gone and all the grease had sloshed out. Just generally looking really past it. Then we pulled out the differential. This thing was leaking from about every possible place imaginable. Now that wasn't really the reason I replaced the differential, and that's because this was an open differential and I want to have a little sportier feel in the car, so now it has a limited slip differential in there. And then finally we've got the old brake lines. These were in pretty bad condition. You can see that they have lots of dry cracking throughout. You know, preventative maintenance measure really. One of them I had to cut in half just to get it off. The fitting on the hard line was a little bit stuck, so I just basically cut this in half so I could unscrew it, and then I was able to free up the hard line fitting. So everything's put back together and looking nice. Let's go look under the car and see what things look like. All right, look at that. Differentials, nice and shiny, and then the axles, and then the new brake lines going into the calipers. Then of course the new emergency brake cables. Everything looks pretty good. Everything went together pretty easily as far as working on old cars goes. So there we have it. I am completely filthy, but that's to be expected when you're dealing with an old leaky differential and axles. So now that the rear end of the car is completely done, it's time to start addressing putting the transmission back into the car. That'll be the focus of the next video, but it's not just gonna be putting the transmission back in. It's also going to be putting the new starter motor in, a new clutch slave cylinder in, a new clutch slave cylinder line. We also got to put in that upgraded shifter linkage set that I bought. Then we got to put in the drive shaft and the exhaust. So the next video is going to be a lot of stuff to cover, but I'm looking forward to it and I'm really excited to share it all with you guys. Fingers crossed that it all goes smoothly. So with that, I'm going to wrap this video up and we'll see you guys again next time.